So today I'm going to show you guys how to change a water pump on a GM 1.4 liter turbo engine. These engines were used in a bunch of different Chevy and Buick models. The Cruze, the Sonic, I saw the Malibu had this engine for a couple of years, the Chevy Trax, as well as the Buick Encore also used this 1.4 liter engine. This engine in particular is very susceptible to water pump failure, and in this video, guys, I'm going to show you how to get the water pump changed out. So if you guys don't already have a water pump, I'll have a link to the water pump down in the description, and with that, let's start tearing this thing apart and getting this water pump changed. All right, so to get this water pump replaced, the first thing I have to remove is going to be the air box. Now, I've already removed the intake tube when I did some other work, you know, doing the radiator and stuff. So to take the intake tube off, it's just like one worm clamp, undo it with a screwdriver, and you can pull that tube off, and then undo the mass airflow sensor, pull back the red lock tab, unplug that, and set the plug out of the way. And then this whole air box, you can just lift out of the car. It's sitting down in 2 grommets. This thing should just lift up in one piece and pull out. Something like that. Now, once the air box is out of the way, you can go ahead and remove this motor mount. Now, before you just zip this motor mount out of here, you need to put a floor jack down on the oil pan to hold the engine in the car, because this thing will drop a lot, because about the only thing that holds this half of the engine in is this mount, which you need to remove to get to the water pump. So there are 3 bolts in the body end, and there are 3 bolts in the engine side. They're all 15 millimeter. Once you have it supported, zip these out. There, you saw the engine move a little bit. Pull those out, set those off to the side. And then this, just lift up and out of the car. Now we have to unbolt this half of the bracket. There's 3 bolts in this bracket going into the timing cover. Those are 15 millimeter as well. Once I get this out of here, I'll show you exactly where they're at. So once those 3 bolts are out, you kind of have to finagle this thing around the belt. That should wiggle up and out of there, something like that. So those are the 3 bolts. They're there and there, just into the timing cover, 15 millimeter. So now before I remove the belt, I'm going to take a, what is this, E12 external Torx, break loose the bolts on the water pump pulley. So those should come right out once the belt's off. Now the next thing you're going to do is you're going to remove the belt, and to do that you have an E14 external Torx on this pulley. And what you're going to do, get your ratchet on there, and then you're going to get a drill bit or a pop rivet or whatever you have to actually shove into the tensioner. When you compress the tensioner, there's going to be a hole exposed down near this spring. So when I compress this, you'll see, I'll get you guys in close after I remove it, but there's going to be a hole in this tensioner that you're going to be able to shove this pop rivet into to essentially hold this tensioner together. What can happen is if you don't use this pop rivet, this tensioner can essentially come apart. So something to watch for. So now the belt's out of the way, pulley's loose. I'm going to go ahead and remove the pulley for the water pump. So while I'm in here, I'm actually going to take the tensioner just completely off. I have a new idler for it, so that, coupled with the fact that everything in here is so friggin' gross that I just want to clean everything up, and it's going to be a heck of a lot easier to clean if I get this tensioner out of the way. And then, not to mention, it'll be a lot easier for me to change that pulley with the tensioner over on the bench. Because this thing has so many oil leaks, I'm also going to be replacing the serpentine belt while I'm here because, well, frankly, every other piece of rubber underneath the hood of this thing has been destroyed. So when you're into it this far, what's a you know, $10 or $15 serpentine belt at this point? So there's a better view of what I had to do with the pop rivet to keep this spring in place. So what I'm going to do is there's a bunch of different lengths of bolts in the old water pump. So as I'm pulling a bolt out, I'm going to put it in the hole that I removed it from, because you'll see as I'm pulling this apart, like every one of these fasteners on this water pump is a different length. So if you get them screwed up, you're gonna have to do some figuring out to figure out where everything goes. So just try to stay organized here because it's gonna save you time in the long run. So the bolts in the water pump appear to be E10 external Torx, like, you know, most of the fasteners we're dealing with here. I'm going to pull the water pump and thermostat housing out as one piece. So I'm going to go through here and get the thermostat unplugged. Like so. And then I'll work on the radiator hoses on both ends. That one's going to be a nightmare. I'll have to do that when the water pump's loose. I can get the one on the far end though. So the only thing I got holding it right now are the hose on this end, which the clamp is loose, the hose is just stuck, and then the hose on the thermostat housing on this end. So there's that. Let's see if I can get this other one off. Okay, so at this point, some time has passed. I've got the front of the engine all cleaned up here. I've got a new tensioner pulley bolted up into place, cleaned up the tensioner, everything's bolted back up as far as that's concerned. So now I'm ready to put on the water pump. Now, as far as putting on the water pump, I already transferred and put on a new thermostat housing. As you can see, this is an aluminum version. The stock piece is plastic, again, like the other plastic components that I've replaced with aluminum. Very likely to crack and cause leaks in the future. So hopefully this aluminum piece holds up a little bit better. That's my rationality here. So at this point, I'm going to connect my hoses up first to the water outlet and then to the inlet of the water pump here on the back. And then once those are connected, we'll lay the gasket in place and bolt this thing up. Now, once I have all my hoses hooked up, the water pump's kind of held in place here. And what I'm going to do is, if you look up top, I have the old water pump with all the correct bolts in the correct locations in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take each one of these bolts and transfer it down to the new water pump. Before I do that, I have to get my gasket in place. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to hold the gasket on the water pump and then sort of hang the gasket using one of the bolts. So now that gasket should be held. Now we can go ahead and lift up the water pump and hopefully get this thing to where it needs to be. So now all I got to do is start transferring bolts. Before I completely put it back together, I'm going to hose it down with some brake cleaner. Try and get some of my fingerprints off of it. With that, we can put the water pump pulley back on. I can get the bolt holes to line up. There we go. I'll torque all these when the belt's on. Now we can throw our belt back on. Just make sure you're going around all the right pulleys. There we go, pull her. Get my hand down here so I can pull the pop rivet out. There we go. The belt's on and we put the motor mount back in. Now that your belt's on, make sure you snug up your water pump pulley bolts. And now we can bolt back up the motor mount bracket. You gotta thread this thing again around the belt. Now we can bolt in the other half of the motor mount. Something like that. Pull our floor jack out. Put the air box back in. Plug in your mass airflow sensor. Finally, reinstall your intake tube. Now at this point, the last thing you have to do is put coolant in the vehicle. Now to do that, what you're gonna do is simply remove the cap from the coolant jug, dump your coolant in the vehicle. Do not put the cap back on the coolant jug because you're gonna have to top it off. Get in and start the vehicle up and turn the heat on full blast. Full blast out the vents and just let the car sit here and run, and you're gonna work all those air pockets out of the cooling system and then just top off the coolant jug as needed. So guys, that's about it for this video. Like I said, I will have links in the description to the water pump and to some of the tools you may need to get this job done, or to even diagnose if you have a bad water pump or not. As always guys, if you guys like the video, hit like. If you wanna see more content, go down and hit subscribe. Thanks for watching, guys.